Ancient mariners faced black oceans with only firelight to guide them home. This is the world before lighthouses, a realm of signal fires, mysterious stone mirrors, and night sailing tactics tested in the open sea. By the end of this journey, you will understand how these forgotten systems laid the very foundation for modern navigation. We will uncover why civilizations poured vast resources into these early technologies and what their clever solutions reveal about human ingenuity in the face of danger. How did a polished stone amplify a fire's glow across miles of open water? What secret methods did sailors use to navigate when the coast disappeared into darkness? These ancient mysteries hold surprising lessons for our own technological age. What does it truly mean to find your way when everything around you is unknown? High on a windswept cliff, a great fire roared against the deepening night. This was the dawn of maritime guidance, a simple bonfire built and tended by an entire community. For the sailors on the dark water, that distant, flickering glow was the difference between a safe harbor and a shattered hull. These signal fires represent humanity's first conscious effort to create a permanent navigational aid, a system so vital that its origins are lost to antiquity. Archaeologists point to the Phoenicians and Greeks as masters of this early technology, civilizations whose wealth flowed across the sea. They understood that a light on shore was more than just a pile of burning wood. As historian John Hale noted, the beacon fire was more than just a light. It was a community's promise to protect those at sea. Keeping that promise demanded immense effort. Each fire required a constant supply of wood, often scarce in coastal regions, and a team of dedicated watchkeepers. These men, staying awake through long, cold nights, became some of the world's first maritime professionals, their vigilance directly tied to their town's survival. The placement of these fires was a matter of strategic genius. A beacon on a prominent headlight could guide ships into a lucrative trade lane, funneling wealth and goods into one city's port instead of a rival's. This transformed a simple safety measure into a tool of economic power. Why would ancient societies pour such relentless labor into a system that was so vulnerable to wind, rain, and fog? The answer lies in what was at stake. A reliable beacon meant more ships would risk the voyage, bringing trade, information, and cultural exchange. It was the beginning of a fundamental shift, a move from hoping for the best to actively shaping a safer world. That leap from a simple, open fire to something more controlled and powerful would define the next great innovation in our story. Building a signal fire that could endure a coastal storm required more than just stacking wood. It was an act of engineering, one that began with choosing the perfect vantage point. Ancient builders sought out the highest, most exposed cliffs, places where the light would travel the farthest over the open ocean. There, they constructed platforms designed to defy the elements. The Greeks built elevated stone altars, their flat surfaces keeping the precious fuel dry and the flames visible from great distances. Further north, Nordic communities erected protective stone circles, their walls shielding the vital embers from howling winds and driving rain, according to maritime archaeologist Dr. Elena Martinez. These sites were more than just conveniently high. We have found fire platforms positioned with astronomical precision, suggesting an advanced understanding of seasonal navigation patterns. The alignment of these fires may have helped guide sailors during specific times of the year, when constellations shifted and sea routes became more perilous. The sheer scale of fuel consumption was staggering. A single major beacon, kept burning night after night, could consume the wood of an entire forest over the course of a year. This created a constant, urgent demand for resources, turning the gathering of firewood into a critical community effort. To manage this relentless task, sophisticated organizational systems emerged. In the Mediterranean, trained crews worked in strict rotations, their lives dedicated to maintaining the flame. Across Asia, some cultures developed elaborate fire-tending techniques, using specific types of resinous wood to create a brighter, longer-lasting burn. This global effort highlights a universal truth: the safety of seafarers was worth any price. Perhaps the most legendary example of this ambition was the Colossus of Rhodes. While often remembered as a magnificent statue, some historians propose it served a dual purpose. Its great height and prominent location at the harbor entrance would have made it an ideal platform for a massive signal fire, a literal guiding giant for incoming ships. This idea leads to a practical question. With so many fires dotting the coastline, how did a sailor know which glow was meant for them? The answer lies in the system's growing sophistication. Official navigation beacons were often built in distinct, recognizable patterns or were maintained with a consistency that a random campfire could not match. This early need for a coded, reliable signal was the crucial spark. It pushed ancient engineers to wonder if they could do more than just sustain a fire. What if they could shape its very light? But what if you could capture that fire and throw it across the water? This leads us to the second ancient method, a technology that seems to blur the line between myth and engineering: the polished stone mirror. Alongside the great signal fires, archaeologists have unearthed mysterious concave discs carved from materials like obsidian or polished bronze. These were not simple vanity mirrors. Their surfaces were ground with a precise, bowl-like curvature, a shape designed not to show a reflection, but to capture and concentrate light. Optical historian Professor Kenji Tanaka theorizes that these were sophisticated tools. He states these were not mere decorative items. Their precise curvature suggests an understanding of reflection principles centuries before the formal science of optics even existed. The creation of such a device was a monumental task. Artisans would spend months, perhaps years, carefully grinding a slab of obsidian or basalt into a perfect concave shape, then polishing it to a high-gloss finish with increasingly fine abrasives. This was not a random art form. It was a deliberate manufacturing process aimed at achieving a specific optical effect. The material chosen was critical. A mirror made from volcanic obsidian with its glass-like consistency could be polished to a razor-sharp reflectivity, potentially projecting a tighter, more defined beam. In contrast, a disc of basalt or granite would produce a softer, more diffuse glow, perhaps used for broader illumination of a harbor entrance. Fragments of these ancient devices have been found in key maritime centers, from the ports of ancient Crete to the ruins of Carthage, often located near the very foundations of what were likely signal fire platforms. This physical proximity is a crucial clue. It strongly suggests a practical, integrated system where fire and mirror worked in concert. Yet, maintaining such a system in a harsh coastal environment was a constant battle. The salt-laden air would quickly cloud the most brilliantly polished surface, requiring a relentless regimen of cleaning and repolishing to keep the mirror's reflective power intact. This ongoing labor implies these objects were of utmost importance. This practical challenge leads to a deeper mystery. Some of these stone discs have been found in ceremonial contexts, leading to debates about their true purpose. Were they sacred objects used in rituals to harness the power of the sun or moon? Or were they pragmatic tools for saving lives at sea? The most compelling evidence points to a dual role. The mirrors discovered near port facilities show signs of wear consistent with practical use, not just ritual display. Their precise optical geometry is over-engineered for mere ceremony. It is the mark of a technology refined through real-world application. This represents a crucial intellectual bridge. It marks the moment ancient engineers stopped seeing a fire as just a source of light and started seeing it as a source of directed energy. They had begun to shape light itself, setting the stage for a revolution in how humanity would conquer the darkness. Yet even with fire and mirror, the horizon could still vanish into a moonless black. When the guiding lights of the coast were swallowed by distance or storm, ancient sailors faced the true test of their craft, navigating the open ocean by night. This demanded a different kind of genius, one that relied not on built structures, but on an intimate, almost supernatural connection to the natural world. Mariners became masters of reading a darkened environment. They memorized the precise patterns of constellations, not as static pictures, but as moving clockworks in the sky. The Polynesians, for instance, did not just follow a single star. They navigated by star paths, knowing which specific stars would rise and set over their destination islands, creating mental highways across the Pacific. In the Mediterranean, sailors learned to read the subtle textures of the sea itself, discerning the direction of hidden currents by the way waves broke against the hull. Their environmental awareness was truly extraordinary. As naval historian Captain Maria Santos explains, Phoenician sailors could navigate by tasting seawater and observing bioluminescent organisms. A change in salinity might hint at a distant river mouth, while shimmering trails of plankton could reveal underwater currents invisible to the surface eye. They listened to the sounds of waves crashing on faraway shores and watched for the flight patterns of seabirds at dusk, knowing certain species always flew toward land. Becoming this attuned to the world was not a matter of luck. It was the result of a grueling, systematic training regimen. Apprentice navigators were often blindfolded, forced to rely solely on the feel of the wind on their skin and the rhythm of the swell beneath the boat to determine their heading. They practiced mental mapping for years, constructing detailed charts in their minds that connected star positions, wave patterns, and seasonal winds. This created distinct cultural traditions. While Polynesian navigators looked almost exclusively to the heavens, their Mediterranean counterparts became experts in reading the sea's surface, a skill vital for navigating its complex, island-dotted basins. This rare expertise commanded a high price. A skilled night pilot, a man who could guide a ship safely through a starless, overcast night, was worth his weight in gold, often earning a premium wage that set him far above the common crew. These men were the elite athletes of the ancient maritime world. Their skills were forged and proven on dangerous, experimental voyages into unknown waters. Can you picture the courage it took to sail westward into the open Atlantic with no guarantee of land, trusting only your knowledge of the stars and the feel of the ocean? The psychological pressure was immense. To combat fear and maintain morale, these crews developed deep-seated rituals and a culture of unwavering trust in their navigator. They had to believe the man reading the waves in the dark could lead them to a dawn they could not yet see. This was human adaptability in its purest form, a testament to our ability to find a path even when all the lights go out. The ultimate expression of this ancient technology did not rise from a vacuum. The legendary lighthouse of Alexandria was the culmination of everything that came before it, a masterpiece built upon a foundation of forgotten signal stations. Long before its construction, a network of smaller beacons already guided ships along the Egyptian coast, creating a vital chain for Mediterranean traders navigating the treacherous Nile Delta. The geographer Strabo himself noted the presence of these navigation aids, describing towers and markers that helped pilots find safe passage through the shifting silt and sandbars. These were the prototypes, the testing grounds for the ideas that would one day converge on the island of Pharos. Egyptian engineers were brilliant synthesizers. They did not invent from scratch, but instead observed and improved upon the best ideas from across the known world. They studied the elevated stone platforms of the Greeks, designed to keep fires dry and visible. They incorporated concepts from Persian mirror technology, potentially using polished metal reflectors to intensify their beacon's reach. This was not mere imitation, it was a deliberate act of technological fusion, taking proven elements and scaling them up to an unprecedented degree. The economic driver for this innovation was immense. Alexandria was the primary grain supplier for the burgeoning Roman Empire, and a steady, reliable flow of ships was essential to prevent famine and unrest in Rome. Every ship lost to a dark coast was a direct threat to political stability, making the investment in a supreme navigational aid a matter of state security. This knowledge transfer between cultures was the true engine of progress. Persian optics, Greek masonry, and Egyptian logistical prowess combined to create something entirely new. Political significance was equally profound. By building the world's most advanced lighthouse, the Ptolemaic rulers were not just making the seas safer, they were establishing absolute maritime dominance. Control the light, and you control the trade routes, the wealth, and the power. Evidence for this evolutionary design is found in the Pharos' own structure. Its massive square base was a common feature in earlier fortified watchtowers, while its octagonal and cylindrical upper sections showcased more advanced engineering for greater height and stability. The story of Alexandria reveals a powerful truth, that our greatest technological leaps are rarely singular moments of genius. They are almost always the product of incremental improvements, of borrowing, refining, and connecting the brilliant dots left by those who came before. A glowing stone held by a Valkyrie guiding a lost ship to shore sounds like pure fantasy, yet these ancient stories often held profound practical truths, concealing the secrets of navigation within the language of myth. The Greek legend of Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods, can be read as a powerful metaphor for humanity's mastery of signal fire technology. Bringing fire down from the heavens was not just a divine gift, it was the ultimate act of technological defiance, giving mortals the power to conquer the coastal darkness. Similarly, those Norse tales of spectral maidens using glowing stones to light the way for heroes may well be a poetic description of the earliest polished stone mirrors, their captured firelight appearing like supernatural aid to those on the water. Folklorist Dr. Anya Petrov suggests these stories were more than just entertainment. She explains that many navigation secrets were preserved in mythological language to protect valuable trade knowledge. By encoding a vital technique within a sacred story, a culture could ensure its survival across generations, safe from the ears of rival traders. The line between religious ritual and technological practice was often intentionally blurred. On a stormy headland, a temple priest tending an eternal flame was not merely performing a ceremony, he was also, quite practically, maintaining a critical coastal beacon. His sacred duty and his community's economic survival were one and the same. The rhythmic chants and precise procedures of these rituals functioned as a living instruction manual, ensuring that the complex knowledge of fire tending and mirror polishing was passed down without error. Oral traditions became the backup drives for entire maritime systems. Epic poems recited at feasts might contain subtle cues about the best sailing routes or the distinctive flame pattern of a friendly port. A hero's journey across a treacherous sea could be a detailed, memorable guide to avoiding real-world hazards disguised as an adventure. This fusion of the sacred and the practical raises a compelling question. When ancient texts speak of gods testing heroes at sea, or of divine favor guiding a ship through a perilous strait, are we reading about miracles, or are we seeing coded accounts of early navigation methods being tested under extreme conditions? The myth of Jason and the arrows of Apollo, for instance, where the god shoots flaming arrows to light the path, could be a dramatic retelling of the first successful use of a coordinated mirror system to reflect a signal fire's beam. These stories are not just fanciful decorations on the past. They are unexpected windows into a world where every technological advance was a kind of magic, and where the memory of how to find your way home was too precious to be written down in any form that could be easily lost or stolen. These silent stones along forgotten coastlines hold the proof. Across the globe, from the sun-baked cliffs of the Levant to the misty headlands of Britain, archaeologists are unearthing the physical remains of these ancient guidance systems. The evidence is often subtle, a pattern in the landscape or a discoloration in the soil, but it tells a compelling story. At a dig site in modern-day Lebanon, researchers uncovered a raised stone platform positioned with a clear, uninterrupted view of the sea. Nearby, they found the remains of a small structure, likely a shelter for the watchkeepers who maintained the flame night after night. This was not a simple campsite. The strategic placement and built infrastructure point to a permanent official function. Maritime archaeologist Dr. Robert Chen has studied these sites extensively. He states, "We have discovered fire platforms aligned to create visual corridors along shipping lanes. This was sophisticated spatial planning." These were not random bonfires. They formed a chain, a series of stepping stones of light that guided a vessel safely from one point to the next, much like a modern airport runway's lights guide a plane. Distinguishing a navigational beacon from an ordinary hearth or a ceremonial fire pit is one of the field's greatest challenges. An ancient cooking fire leaves behind food scraps and broken pottery. A ritual fire might contain offerings of precious objects or bones. A signal fire, however, tells a different story. Its evidence is found in the sheer volume of fuel consumed. Excavations reveal deep layers of ash and charcoal, accumulated over centuries, at locations that make no sense for a settlement but perfect sense for a watch post. The stones themselves are often cracked and reddened from sustained, intense heat, and specialized tools, like long-handled pokers and rakes for managing a large fire, have been found nearby. Then there are the curious artifacts, smooth, concave fragments of stone or bronze discovered in coastal settlements. While complete mirrors are exceptionally rare, these pieces, often dismissed as ritual objects, show wear patterns and soot residues that suggest they were held near a fire again and again. Chemical analysis of sediment layers can reveal the telltale signature of specific fuels, like resins or certain woods, chosen for their bright, clean burn. Carbon dating of these layers allows researchers to build a timeline, proving that a particular headland was used as a beacon site for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. This was not a temporary solution. It was a long-term commitment etched into the very earth. The methodological challenges are immense. How do you reconstruct a technology that left behind little more than scorched earth and soot-stained rocks? The answer lies in connecting these physical dots across vast distances, seeing the pattern of platforms, storage pits, and watch huts not as isolated ruins, but as nodes in a vast, ancient network. Each new excavation transforms a legend into a map and a myth into a working system, revealing the incredible lengths our ancestors went to in their battle against the Dark Sea. History books can only tell us so much. To truly understand these ancient systems, we must try to build them with our own hands. This is the world of experimental archaeology, where scholars step out of the library and onto the windswept cliff, armed with period-accurate tools and a simple question: does it actually work? At a university on the Irish coast, a team led by experimental archaeologist Dr. James O'Donnell constructed a signal fire platform using only stones, clay, and wood types available to Bronze Age communities. They stacked the fuel in the precise, layered method described in fragmentary texts, and when they lit the blaze, the results were startling. From a boat just 2 miles offshore, the fire was a clear, unwavering point of light, but its effectiveness was entirely at the mercy of the environment. A sudden rain squall could reduce the beacon to a smoldering, invisible heap in minutes, proving that ancient fire tenders didn't just need fuel, they needed an almost prophetic ability to read the weather. The team's work with polished stone mirrors yielded even more surprising data. Using a replica obsidian disc, ground and polished over many months to match ancient specifications, they aimed its concave face at the fire. Dr. O'Donnell observed that their replica stone mirror projected a detectable beam over 3 nautical miles, far beyond what historians previously believed possible. This was not a focused laser beam, but a distinct directional glow that cut through the general haze of the firelight, a bright path on the water that would have been unmistakable to a lost sailor. The experiments revealed the mirror's limitations as well. Its power was fragile. A slight misalignment with the flame would scatter the light, and a single fingerprint on the polished surface could dim its output significantly. This proved the role of the mirror operator was a highly skilled one, a technician who had to constantly adjust the angle and clean the surface to maintain that vital corridor of light. The most daring tests, however, took place on the open water. Crews of modern sailors, trained in ancient techniques, embarked on night voyages using only the stars, wave patterns, and seabird behavior described in historical accounts. These recreations were humbling. On a clear night with a trained navigator, the methods worked with remarkable accuracy, but under an overcast sky, the margin for error vanished. The sailors reported a profound psychological shift, a growing anxiety when the familiar cues disappeared, forcing them to rely on a deeper, more intuitive feel for the sea. This hands-on testing exposes critical gaps in our historical understanding. We can replicate the tools, but can we ever fully replicate the mindset, the generations of ingrained knowledge that allowed an ancient navigator to read a barely perceptible shift in the swell? Furthermore, modern ethics inevitably limit these experiments. Today's researchers cannot send a crew into a genuine storm without a GPS safety net, a luxury their ancient counterparts certainly did not have. This safety net, while necessary, means we may never fully comprehend the true desperation and the ultimate triumph of finding your way back when failure was not an option. These recreations transform abstract theories into tangible, sometimes perilous reality. They prove that the ancient world was not a place of crude guesswork, but of refined, hard-won expertise, where the line between a safe return and disaster was as thin as a beam of reflected firelight on a black sea. The true cost of a single night's safety was staggering. Consider the labor behind a single coastal beacon. Just to keep one fire burning required a constant stream of woodcutters, haulers, and watchkeepers, their collective wages and supplies adding up to a substantial ongoing expense. Manufacturing a single polished stone mirror was an investment in itself, demanding the skilled labor of an artisan for months on end. This was not a casual hobby, it was a serious capital project. Ancient societies paid this price because the return on investment was even greater. Economic historian Professor Liam Walsh puts it plainly: the signal fire network was ancient Rome's equivalent of infrastructure spending. It paid for itself through increased trade efficiency. A reliable beacon system meant more ships would risk the voyage, especially with valuable cargoes. This directly translated into higher port traffic, more goods moving through markets, and increased tax revenue for the city or kingdom that controlled the light. The funding models for this infrastructure varied widely. In highly centralized empires like Ptolemaic Egypt, the state funded the lighthouses and signal stations directly, viewing them as a matter of national security and economic policy. In contrast, bustling port cities like Carthage often saw merchant guilds form consortiums to build and maintain their own navigation aids, pooling their resources to protect their collective investments. This economic engine created a powerful feedback loop. A safer coast attracted more trade, which generated more wealth, which provided more funds to improve and expand the safety systems. A port with a famous, reliable beacon could dominate regional trade, funneling commerce away from its less equipped rivals. This economic power inevitably shaped politics. Coastal towns that controlled vital beacon headlands held significant leverage over their inland neighbors who depended on that access to the sea. Alliances were forged and wars were fought over these points of light. But what happened when the system broke down? Historical records from periods of war or economic collapse show a dramatic and immediate drop in shipping activity. Without the guiding fires, merchants would not risk their ships and cargo. Trade routes would wither, ports would stagnate, and the flow of goods and information would slow to a trickle. The economics of ancient maritime safety reveal a fundamental truth. These early lighthouses were not just humanitarian projects. They were the strategic infrastructure of their day, the internet cables of the ancient world, and their steady glow was a direct measure of a civilization's economic health. The same dark sea lapped at different shores, but each civilization saw a unique puzzle in its waves. In the storm-tossed Mediterranean, the solution was a network of signal fires, a chain of fire beacons connecting one fortified city-state to the next. This was a system built for commerce and control, where the guiding light was also a tool of economic power. Half a world away, the Polynesians looked not to the coast but to the heavens. They developed no lighthouses because they needed none. Their guidance system was a celestial map memorized in elite navigation schools. Their canoes were their lighthouses, and their navigators carried the guiding stars within their minds. Meanwhile, along the intricate coastlines of ancient China, a different approach emerged. Imperial engineers constructed towering pagoda-style structures that served as both daytime landmarks and platforms for nighttime signal fires, blending architectural grandeur with pragmatic function. The harsh North Atlantic demanded yet another solution. Nordic sailors relied less on permanent structures and more on natural markers, carving runic symbols into coastal rocks to indicate safe passages and treacherous currents, creating a coded language of stone for those who knew how to read it. These differences were not random. They were direct responses to the environment. The predictable winds and visible coastlines of the Mediterranean made fire networks practical. The vast, featureless expanse of the Pacific made celestial navigation essential. As anthropologist Dr. Sofia Garcia notes, the Minoans treated navigation as sacred knowledge, while Phoenicians approached it as commercial intelligence. This fundamental cultural value dictated the path of innovation. For the Minoans, the secrets of the sea were intertwined with the divine, protected by priestly castes. For the Phoenicians, it was proprietary data, a trade secret to be guarded as fiercely as any cargo. This knowledge did not stay locked within one culture. It flowed along the very trade routes it helped to create. Persian mirror technology likely influenced Greek attempts to amplify their fires. Chinese tower designs may have inspired later structures in the Indian Ocean. This was not mere copying, it was a process of creative adaptation, where a good idea was refined to meet local needs and materials. The level of a civilization's maritime investment was a clear signal of its priorities. A society whose lifeblood was overseas trade, like Carthage, would pour resources into sophisticated lighthouses. A culture focused on inland agriculture might only maintain simple beach fires. These regional choices show us that technology is never developed in a vacuum. It is a conversation between human ingenuity and the specific challenges of a place, a constant negotiation between what the world presents and what a culture values most. Behind every beacon was a person standing in the wind. The keeper of the ancient light was more than a watchman. He was the living heart of the entire system. His training began in childhood, often within a specific family lineage or a closed guild, where the secrets of fire and reflection were passed down like a sacred trust. An apprentice would first learn to identify the perfect wood for a long, clean burn, and how to layer it for maximum heat and visibility. He would practice for endless hours polishing a stone mirror, learning the precise pressure needed to achieve that flawless curve without cracking the precious material. This was not a job one learned from a manual. It was an embodied knowledge, a craft absorbed through years of patient, watchful imitation. The psychological weight of this duty was immense. Imagine a single keeper or a small team stationed on a remote headland for months at a time. Their only company was the howling wind and the crash of waves below. Their world shrank to the circle of firelight, their senses constantly tuned to the sound of a distant sail or the first hint of a storm rolling in. Ancient records from Egypt speak of watchkeepers who swore oaths to the gods, vowing to maintain the flame even at the cost of their own lives. The isolation could warp a person's mind, yet the responsibility kept them anchored. They knew that if their fire faltered, a ship and all the souls aboard could be lost. This was not a post for the faint of heart. It demanded a rare blend of stoic resilience and unwavering vigilance. Were these keepers revered or forgotten? The answer is as complex as the societies they served. In some cultures, like the priestly classes of Minoan Crete, the tenders of the sacred fire held high status, their role intertwined with religious authority. In the highly commercial ports of Phoenicia, however, the skilled mirror operator was a valued technician, well compensated for his expertise, but not necessarily afforded noble status. He was a professional, a master of his craft, whose worth was measured in the safe passage of merchant vessels. In smaller communities, the role might fall to the entire village on a rotating basis, a shared civic duty that bound everyone to the safety of the sea. It was a task that carried its own quiet honor, a deep respect earned through relentless service. The transmission of this knowledge was a fragile thread connecting generations. A father would teach his son not just how to stack wood, but how to read the color of the smoke to predict a change in weather. A master would show his apprentice the exact angle to hold the bronze mirror when a ship was approaching from the northeast. This was knowledge held in the hands and the eyes, preserved in stories and songs recited during the long nights. There were no textbooks, only the living memory of the craft. If a lineage was broken by war or plague, the specialized techniques of that coast could be lost forever, plunging a once safe harbor back into darkness. What motivated a person to dedicate their life to this solitary watch? For some, it was a family tradition, a duty inherited and honored. For others, it was the promise of steady wages in a precarious world. But for many, the motivation was simpler and more profound. It was the profound satisfaction of seeing a ship's lantern dip in acknowledgement from the dark water, a silent thank you from sailors who would never know his name. It was the understanding that his small, lonely fire was a single point in a vast, interconnected network of light, a human chain against the indifference of the sea. The technology was nothing without the human spirit that sustained it. a spirit that burned as brightly as any signal fire against the encroaching night. A signal fire was a defiant statement against the dark, but it was a fragile one. The very elements it was built to defy could extinguish its power in an instant. A dense fog would swallow the light whole, turning a brilliant beacon into a dim, useless smudge. Driving rain could drown the flames in minutes, while the smoke from a poorly ventilated fire could obscure its own glow, creating a self-defeating shroud. Ancient engineers faced a fundamental truth: you could not control the weather, so you had to build a system that could survive it. When the light failed, sound took its place. In treacherous, fog-bound channels, some cultures deployed the earliest bellboys. These were not the complex automated floats of today, but simple, massive bells suspended from wooden frames or moored rafts, their clappers set in motion by the waves themselves. Their mournful, rhythmic tolling cut through the thickest mist, providing an audible landmark where a visual one was impossible. This was a brilliant workaround, a shift from one sense to another to maintain the vital flow of information. On land, the limitations of a single fire were just as stark. The curvature of the earth itself placed a hard cap on visibility. Even the highest fire on the clearest night could only be seen from perhaps 20 miles out at sea. To overcome this, ancient navigators created relay networks. A ship would sail from one beacon's range into the next, hopping from one island of light to another like a cosmic stepping stone path. This required breathtaking coordination between coastal communities, a silent agreement that the chain must never be broken. The challenge of fuel was a relentless economic drain. A great fire, burning night after night, consumed forests. This inefficiency sparked its own innovations. Instead of just building bigger fires, engineers got smarter about containing and directing the heat. They constructed stone hearths with clever drafts to maximize combustion, and they experimented with different fuels, discovering that certain resins or animal fats produced a brighter, hotter flame for the same amount of wood. Engineering historian Dr. Benjamin Carter highlights a key Roman breakthrough. He states, the Romans developed parabolic stone reflectors that doubled signal fire visibility without additional fuel, true engineering elegance. This was a leap in thinking. They were no longer just feeding the flame, they were sculpting its output, using geometry to do the work of 1,000 extra logs. For the sailors themselves, these technological gaps demanded a parallel evolution in strategy. When the coast disappeared into a storm or a bank of fog, their survival depended on the fallback systems they had practiced for years. The use of sounding weights, lead lines coated in tallow to bring up samples of the seabed, became critical. A navigator feeling a bottom of coarse sand instead of soft mud could pinpoint his location on a mental chart with startling accuracy. They mapped invisible underwater currents by observing subtle changes in water temperature and surface texture, creating a liquid roadmap for when the sky and land offered no clues. This constant interplay between limitation and ingenuity is the real lesson. The ancient maritime world was not a linear march toward a single perfect solution. It was an ecosystem of complementary technologies, each one patching the weaknesses of another. The fire worked until the fog rolled in, then the bell took over. The mirror extended the range until the ship sailed beyond the horizon. Then the stars and the sounding line became the guide. What can a modern problem solver learn from this? The answer lies in the elegance of working within constraints. The Romans did not solve their fuel problem by inventing an infinite energy source. They solved it by rethinking how they used the energy they already had. They turned a physical limitation into a catalyst for intellectual creativity. The greatest innovations are often born not from unlimited resources, but from the clever, determined work of making a little bit go a very, very long way. The same fires that guided merchants home could also guide an invasion fleet to its target. This dual nature of the beacon meant that from its earliest days, maritime guidance was inextricably linked with warfare. Ancient navies quickly realized that a system built for safety could be twisted into a weapon of strategy and surprise. Coastal fortifications used their signal fires not just to welcome friendly ships, but to send urgent warnings down the coast, flashing news of an enemy's approach faster than any horse could gallop. A chain of fires could mobilize an entire region's defenses in a matter of hours, turning isolated garrisons into a coordinated network. Military historian Colonel David Chen emphasizes this point, stating, "Control of coastal guidance systems often determined naval dominance in the Mediterranean." They were not just aids, they were strategic assets. The side that controlled the lights controlled the sea lanes, and by extension, the flow of troops, supplies, and information. This military need became a powerful engine for innovation. The simple bonfire was no longer sufficient. It had to become a language. Forces developed sophisticated coded systems, using shutters or woven screens to create distinct fire patterns. A single, steady flame might mean all is clear, while a fire repeatedly obscured and revealed could signal a specific number of enemy ships on the horizon. The polished stone mirror evolved from a simple amplifier into a precise signaling device. A skilled operator could flash complex messages across miles of water using sunlight by day or a controlled fire by night, a form of optical telegraphy that allowed for silent, instantaneous communication between a fleet and its command on shore. Historical accounts of naval battles are filled with moments where this specialized knowledge decided the outcome. An admiral who understood night sailing tactics could maneuver his fleet under cover of darkness, using the enemy's own coastal beacons as a guide to their anchorage, launching a devastating attack at dawn from an unexpected direction. The defensive applications were equally critical. Watchkeepers on headlands were the first line of defense, their primary duty shifting from assistance to surveillance. They learned to distinguish the silhouette of a warship from that of a merchant vessel, and their early warning could give a coastal city precious hours to secure its harbor and ready its walls. This military secrecy, however, created a paradox. While wartime pressures accelerated the refinement of these technologies, the need to protect tactical advantages often slowed their dissemination to the commercial world. A state might closely guard the secrets of its most advanced mirror designs or its coded fire sequences, fearing they would fall into enemy hands. This meant that the most cutting-edge navigation aids were often reserved for military campaigns, only filtering down to merchant fleets years or even decades later, once they were no longer considered state secrets. This constant push and pull between open assistance and closed control shaped the very evolution of these systems. The same lighthouse that served as a public good in peacetime could become a classified military installation in war, its keepers sworn to secrecy. How did this dual-use nature shape their development? It meant that many of our greatest navigational breakthroughs were born not from a pure desire for exploration, but from the urgent, brutal necessity of gaining an edge in conflict. The imperative to see farther, communicate faster, and strike harder in the dark pushed ancient engineers to their creative limits, and in doing so, they lit the way for everyone who would follow. The Roman watchtower, repurposed from a military outpost to a platform for a guiding flame, marks a pivotal moment in this story. This was the crucial intermediate step, a shift from a temporary pile of wood to a permanent stone structure designed specifically to host a navigational fire. Across their vast empire, the Romans constructed these towers along key coastal routes, building them with the same enduring strength as their roads and aqueducts. The fire was no longer an event, it was an institution housed in architecture meant to last for centuries. Yet, as architectural historian Professor Emma Wilson explains, the transition was not sudden. For centuries, simple fires operated alongside sophisticated towers in a hybrid system. A massive stone tower might dominate a major port entrance, while just down the coast, a simple community maintained bonfire on a headland still guided local fishing boats into a secluded bay. This coexistence reveals a world of layered navigation, where technology spread at different speeds for different users. The dazzling success of the Lighthouse of Alexandria acted as a powerful inspiration, but not a universal blueprint. Its image was stamped on coins and celebrated by poets, planting the idea of a monumental maritime guide in the minds of rulers and engineers across the Mediterranean. Ambitious projects to replicate its glory were launched, but often on a more modest scale, adapted to local resources and needs. What made these larger, more permanent structures finally feasible was a revolution in administration and economics. Centralized states with strong tax bases like Imperial Rome could now fund and manage the long-term construction and staffing that a network of stone lighthouses demanded. This was no longer a local community's responsibility. It was a state-sponsored utility. The fuel supply alone required a bureaucratic apparatus to coordinate the cutting, transport, and storage of vast quantities of wood. The real technological leap, however, was happening on a smaller scale, in the workshops of glassmakers and metalworkers. Early stone and bronze mirrors were effective, but they were heavy, difficult to polish, and tarnished easily. The gradual improvement in glassmaking, leading to the creation of clearer, more uniform glass, opened up new possibilities. Artisans began experimenting with glass backed by metal, creating lighter, more reflective surfaces that could be shaped with greater precision. This slow refinement of mirrors was the quiet, patient work that would one day make the classic lighthouse lens possible. So why did some regions cling to their traditional signal fires long after lighthouse technology was proven? The answer lies in a complex calculation of cost, geography, and culture. A remote fishing village had neither the funds nor the need for a stone tower. Their simple fire was a sustainable, effective solution for their local waters. In other areas, the very success of the existing fire network created its own inertia. Why invest in a radical new system when the old one worked well enough? The rate of adoption was ultimately determined by trade volume. The busiest, wealthiest trade hubs where the economic payoff was greatest were the first to build lighthouses. Understanding this long, uneven transition helps us appreciate the true nature of technological change. It is rarely a single switch being flipped, but a slow dawn where the old ways and the new illuminate the same shore for generations. History's memory is profoundly selective, preserving some triumphs while letting others vanish into the fog of time. For every successful lighthouse or polished mirror, there were countless experimental methods that failed to make the transition to the next generation. Consider the obscure references to sound-based navigation found in a few scattered manuscripts. Some coastal cultures apparently developed elaborate ecosystems, constructing curved stone walls on specific headlands. A sailor would shout or blow a horn, and the timing and quality of the echo returning from the cliff face would reveal his distance from shore, or even identify the particular cove he was approaching. More fantastical are the accounts of submerged bells anchored to the seafloor in treacherous channels. The constant motion of the waves would set them tolling, their eerie, resonant chimes traveling far through the water to warn ships away from hidden rocks, a ghostly auditory landmark for the blind. Knowledge preservation specialist Dr. Annika Sharma confirms the scale of this loss. She states, we have found temple inscriptions describing navigation methods we can no longer decipher. The loss is immense. Some of these lost techniques involved complex chemistry. Historical fragments from the Alexandrian library speak of secret recipes for chemical mixtures. Alchemists supposedly created compounds that, when thrown onto a signal fire, would produce brilliantly colored flames, a green or blue or violet blaze that could convey specific messages. A green flame might mean safe harbor here, while a crimson one could signal quarantine or danger. The exact formulas for these dazzling pyrotechnics are now lost, their secrets dying with the guilds that guarded them. Other methods relied on an almost supernatural reading of the natural world. Legendary navigation techniques included mapping the ocean by its phosphorescence. Certain schools taught that different currents and water temperatures created distinct, recognizable patterns in the bioluminescent organisms that lit up a ship's wake at night. A seasoned navigator could supposedly read these shimmering trails like a road map. Another forgotten skill was detecting distant land by observing cloud formations. An isolated, stationary cloud in an otherwise clear sky could indicate an island over the horizon, its presence causing a subtle change in atmospheric conditions visible only to a trained eye. Why were these often effective techniques abandoned? The reasons are as varied as the methods themselves. Some failed because of cultural shifts. A society that turned inward, away from the sea, would have no use for the specialized knowledge of its mariners, and within a generation, that wisdom would be gone. Others succumbed to material shortages. A technique that depended on a rare mineral for its colored flame would become impossible when the last mine was exhausted. Many were simply too specialized, known only to a handful of masters who failed to pass on their entire understanding before they died. This is where oral traditions held a distinct advantage over fragile written records. A master navigator teaching his apprentice on the deck of a ship could convey the subtle feel of a current, the exact sound of a specific echo, the precise hue of a phosphorescent pattern, details that a static inscription could never fully capture. When those oral chains were broken by famine, plague, or war, the knowledge evaporated forever. What can these fragments of lost understanding teach us? They reveal a history of navigation that was far more diverse and creatively experimental than we often assume. Our ancestors were not simply following a straight line of progress. They were constantly exploring alternative pathways, testing the limits of sound, light, chemistry, and sensory perception to solve the fundamental problem of finding their way. Their forgotten experiments remind us that there is rarely only one solution to a great challenge, and that the path we remember is just one of many that were once tried in the darkness. The principles that guided ancient mariners are now being rediscovered in the most advanced fields of exploration. Modern maritime safety experts have studied the strategic placement of ancient signal fire networks to optimize the placement of emergency radio beacons along treacherous coastlines, creating a digital chain of safety mirrors that ancient network of light. The same logic that dictated a fire be built on the highest headland now determines where a satellite uplink station is most effective, proving that geography and line of sight are constants across the millennia. This historical insight directly influences life-saving equipment today. The fundamental idea behind the polished stone mirror, concentrating a weak light source to create a powerful signal, lives on in modern survival kits. Many lifeboats now carry signal mirrors made of lightweight, unbreakable plastic, their surface's precision engraved with a targeting hole. A survivor can use this simple tool to flash a beam of sunlight at a rescue plane or ship with an intensity that can be seen for miles, a direct descendant of the obsidian discs used to amplify firelight. This is low-tech, high-reliability engineering at its best, immune to dead batteries or water damage. The connection extends beyond our planet. NASA engineer Dr. Rachel Lynn confirms this, stating, "Studying ancient celestial navigation helped us develop backup systems for spacecraft. The principles transcend technology levels." Early space missions like Apollo trained astronauts in celestial navigation as a failsafe should their computer systems fail, a direct link to the Polynesian star path navigators. The same mental discipline required to steer by the stars in the open Pacific was applied to orienting a capsule in the vast blackness of space. This historical knowledge is actively shaping modern education. Sailing schools now increasingly incorporate lessons on traditional night sailing tactics, not as a primary method, but as a crucial layer of redundant skills. Sailors learn to read wave patterns and watch for bird behavior, understanding that these environmental cues can provide a vital bearing if their electronic chart plotter fails during a storm. This philosophy of distributed knowledge, where critical information is not held in one vulnerable point, is another ancient lesson applied to modern disaster response. Just as a chain of signal fires created a resilient guidance network, modern emergency planners design communication systems with multiple, overlapping nodes so that if one fails, the message can still get through. Maritime museums around the world have embraced this narrative, moving beyond static displays of artifacts to dynamic demonstrations. Visitors can now try their hand at using a replica stone mirror to signal across a waterway or learn the basic star paths used by ancient navigators, transforming historical theory into tangible experience. This raises a profound question for our technology-dependent age. What can these ancient low-tech solutions teach us about building resilient modern systems? They demonstrate that the most robust systems often blend the cutting edge with the timeless. A ship with a state-of-the-art GPS is far safer if its crew also possesses the foundational knowledge to read the sea and the sky. The past does not just inform the present, it provides a blueprint for enduring safety, reminding us that true navigation is a dialogue between human ingenuity and the eternal elements. That quiet consensus on ancient navigation shatters when you enter the world of academic debate. The polished stone mirrors found near ancient ports are a prime battleground. Were these concave discs sophisticated optical tools, or were they sacred objects used in rituals to honor sun gods? Skeptical historian Dr. Thomas Reed urges caution, stating that many claims about ancient navigation technology rely on interpreting ambiguous evidence. We must separate demonstrated fact from plausible speculation. The same artifact can tell two different stories. A soot stain on a mirror fragment could be proof it was held near a signal fire, or it could be residue from incense burned during a ceremony. Its discovery in a temple complex versus a military watchtower profoundly changes its likely purpose. The debates extend to the very methods of the sailors themselves. How effective were their night sailing tactics really? Some historians argue that accounts of navigating by bioluminescence or wave patterns are romanticized legends passed down through generations of storytellers. They question whether any ancient mariner could truly steer a reliable course across hundreds of miles of open ocean using only the feel of the swell and the taste of the wind. The opposing view insists that these skills were not mystical, but the result of rigorous, systematic training that created a profoundly different kind of environmental awareness, one that modern humans reliant on instruments have largely lost. This leads to the core controversy: how much of this knowledge was tested? Did ancient civilizations conduct controlled sea trials, or did they learn purely through tragic trial-and-error experience? There is little direct evidence for organized experiments, yet the consistent success of certain cultures, like the Polynesians in settling remote islands, suggests a methodical approach to refining their techniques over time. Dating these technological developments is another minefield. A fire platform might be used for 1,000 years, but when was it first built? When was the crucial innovation, the first use of a stone reflector, actually introduced? The evidence is often layered and imprecise. Compounding these questions are modern political and nationalistic narratives. Some scholars point to a tendency to attribute major innovations, like the lighthouse, to a single celebrated civilization, while overlooking parallel developments or earlier prototypes in other regions. This debate is not just about the past, it shapes our understanding of human ingenuity. So how do historians navigate these contentious waters? The most robust methodology relies on convergence, seeking multiple, independent lines of evidence. An artifact's purpose becomes more clear when its archaeological context, its design, and contemporary written accounts all point in the same direction. The ongoing controversy is not a sign of failure, but a testament to the vitality of historical research. It is the engine that drives scholars to look closer, to question assumptions, and to slowly, painstakingly, separate the light of fact from the fog of legend. The glow of a signal fire came at a steep environmental price. Every night of guidance required the consumption of a forest, slowly and steadily. To understand the true scale of these ancient systems, we must consider their ecological footprint, a ledger written in layers of charcoal and soil. The demand for wood was relentless. A single major beacon, maintained for centuries, could denude vast tracts of coastal woodland, forcing communities to travel ever farther for fuel. The air in nearby settlements would have been thick with wood smoke for generations, a constant haze that was the price of maritime safety. Environmental historian Professor Kenji Yamamoto's research reveals a stark contrast in how societies managed this burden. He states some signal fire sites show evidence of managed forestry, while others reveal ecological collapse from unsustainable fuel harvesting. This divergence is crucial. In regions with strong central authority, we find evidence of coppicing, a practice of cutting trees in a way that encourages regrowth, creating a sustainable cycle of fuel production. Other sites tell a darker story. Archaeological digs around some Phoenician outposts show a clear sequence, an initial layer rich in diverse tree pollen, followed by a thick band of charcoal, and then a sterile layer where the pollen vanishes entirely. The land was simply used up. The very location of a signal station was often a negotiation with environmental reality. Builders sought high, exposed cliffs for maximum visibility, but these spots were frequently windswept and barren. If the chosen headland lacked local timber, a complex and costly supply chain had to be established, with wood transported by boat or cart over long distances. This made the beacon exponentially more expensive to maintain. Coastal erosion presented another constant threat. A prime fire platform could crumble into the sea after a severe storm, forcing a sudden and resource-intensive relocation. Societies also had to adapt to longer-term climate shifts. A period of increased rainfall or colder temperatures could alter growing seasons, affecting wood availability and forcing a change in the type of fuel burned, or even the frequency of the fires themselves. The quarrying of stone for mirrors and platforms left its own scars. Extracting large blocks of obsidian or basalt was not a gentle process. It created quarries that disrupted local ecosystems and required their own infrastructure. The most successful systems were those that integrated with their environment rather than fighting it. A community that planted fast-growing trees specifically for fuel, or that positioned its beacon to take advantage of a naturally wind-sheltered alcove, could sustain its guiding light for centuries. Those that simply consumed without thought eventually saw their fires go dark, not from neglect but from an exhausted landscape. This ancient interplay between technology and ecology offers a powerful lesson. It demonstrates that no innovation, no matter how brilliant, exists in a vacuum. Its long-term survival is inextricably linked to the sustainable management of the resources that power it. The story of a signal fire is not just one of light against darkness, but of a fragile balance between human ambition and the enduring capacity of the earth. A Roman mosaic gleams with a golden fire, its flames towering over tiny ships on a sea of blue tile. This was not a technical diagram, but a vision of safety and imperial power captured in stone and glass. Ancient artists and writers left us a gallery of maritime guidance, their works offering a vibrant human counterpoint to the silent evidence of scorched stone and polished obsidian. On Greek pottery, we see scenes of desperate sailors pointing toward a distant glow on a black-figured shore, the signal fire rendered as a brilliant, oversized star. The artist chose to amplify its light, making it the dramatic focal point of the story, a beacon of hope in a narrative of perilous return. These visual records are priceless, for they show us the technology in action, integrated into the lived experience of the people who depended on it. Art historian Dr. Isabella Conti observes that Roman mosaics consistently show signal fires with exaggerated size and brightness. This was artistic license that reveals their profound cultural importance. The mosaicist was not trying to document the fire's exact dimensions, but to communicate its immense symbolic weight, its role as a lifeline for the empire. In the sweeping epics of poets like Homer and Virgil, we find a different kind of truth. Homer's descriptions of Odysseus scanning the horizon for the fires of Ithaca are not just plot points, they are intimate accounts of a mariner's emotional reliance on these terrestrial stars. Virgil's Aeneid provides meticulous, almost technical, descriptions of night sailing, where the hero steers by keeping certain stars astern, a literary record of a practiced navigational technique. The choice of medium shaped the story. A poet could capture the anxiety of a clouded sky and the relief of spotting a friendly flame, emotions a stone carving could only imply. A mosaic, in turn, could depict the grand, organized system, showing multiple ships all guided by the same central light, a testament to communal safety. This artistic evidence helps us understand how ordinary citizens perceived these complex systems. For a merchant in Rome viewing a public mosaic, the lighthouse was not just a tower, it was a symbol of Roman order and technological triumph, a promise that the empire's reach could tame the chaotic sea. For a family listening to an epic poem, the beacon fire was a character in its own right, a silent guardian that brought heroes home. Yet this rich tapestry presents a constant challenge to historians. How do we separate the technological fact from the artistic interpretation? When a poem speaks of a goddess lighting a path with her divine radiance, are we reading about a myth or a poetic description of an exceptionally powerful polished mirror system? The answer often lies in convergence, when multiple art forms from different regions and times all depict a similar practice. Like the use of a shielded fire or a lookout scanning the stars, the artistic clue gains credibility. Art provides the emotional context that technical records lack. An archaeological report can tell us the dimensions of a fire platform, but only a painting can show us the expression on a watchkeeper's face as he spots a sail, or the posture of a sailor as he lifts a stone mirror to catch the dawn light. These representations complete the story, reminding us that these were not cold, impersonal machines, but technologies woven into the very fabric of human hope, fear, and the universal longing for a safe harbor. A fire on a cliff was not just a flame, it was a social contract. The brilliant glow that guided ships required a hidden engine of human coordination, a complex society organized around the single purpose of defying the dark sea. At the top of this hierarchy sat royal overseers, administrators who managed the entire network as a matter of state security. They allocated funds from imperial treasuries, commissioned the construction of new towers, and dictated the standards for fuel quality and fire brightness. This was ancient bureaucracy in action, transforming a local safety measure into a controlled, reliable system. Below them, local committees in port towns handled the day-to-day operations, recruiting labor, managing supplies, and ensuring the watch was kept. This division of labor was remarkably sophisticated. Specialized craftspeople, often members of closed guilds, were responsible for the most delicate tasks. These were the mirror polishers, the experts who knew the precise pressure and abrasives needed to grind obsidian to a perfect curve without shattering it. They were the stonemasons who built the elevated platforms to withstand gales. Their knowledge was a form of power, carefully guarded and passed from master to apprentice. Then came the constant watchkeepers, the men who endured the isolation and the cold, their lives a cycle of stacking wood, tending flames, and scanning the horizon. Their vigilance was supported by an entire unseen economy of support workers, the woodcutters, the haulers, the cooks, and the guards, all essential links in a chain that stretched from the forest to the cliff's edge. Sociologist Dr. Marcus Weber frames this perfectly, noting that navigation technology required social innovation, new forms of organization, trust, and coordination across distances. A ship's captain had to trust that the unknown keeper on a distant headland was just as diligent as the one in his home port. This shared responsibility forged a powerful community identity in coastal settlements. A town's very purpose was often defined by its beacon, its citizens united by the collective duty of protecting those at sea. This created a clear social hierarchy. Access to the most critical navigation knowledge, the star paths, the mirror angles, the coded fire sequences, was tightly controlled. In some cultures, this information was the exclusive domain of priestly castes or elite navigator families, its secrecy a source of their authority and status. The arduous manual labor of fuel gathering and fire tending, however, often fell to those with less power, a social division that mirrored the broader tensions of the ancient world. Conflicts over who controlled a beacon headland were not just about safety, they were brutal economic wars. A rival city might sabotage a fire platform or bribe its keepers to extinguish the light, deliberately redirecting lucrative trade to their own harbor. The social organization behind these systems reveals a profound truth about complex technologies. They are never just collections of tools, they are living structures of human relationship and trust. The stone mirror was inert without the guildsman who knew its secrets. The signal fire was just smoke without the community that pledged to keep it burning. What does this tell us about our own complex systems today? The most advanced technology in the world is ultimately powerless without the social fabric, the shared purpose, and the human trust that brings it to life. A society's relationship with the sea dictated the very nature of its guidance systems. The Mediterranean world, a bustling crossroads of trade and conflict, perfected the signal fire network. These chains of flame were tools of commerce and control, their brilliant glow a public declaration of a city's power and accessibility. Half a world away, Imperial China pursued a different path. There, engineers constructed towering pagodas that served as both daytime landmarks and platforms for sophisticated smoke signals. By day, their distinct silhouettes identified a harbor entrance. By night, watchkeepers could dampen their fires with wet grass or specific oils to produce thick, colored smoke plumes visible for miles in daylight, creating a versatile, all-weather communication system. This fundamental difference in approach was not accidental. As comparative historian Professor Olivia Park explains, the Chinese developed elaborate smoke signaling while Mediterranean cultures focused on fire brightness. These were different solutions to the same problem. The Chinese system prioritized information, using smoke to convey complex messages about weather, safe passage, or even market conditions. The Mediterranean system prioritized pure visibility, a simple, powerful beacon to attract and guide. In the vast, open Pacific, the Polynesians had no need for coastal fires at all. Their world was the ocean itself, and their guidance system was internalized. They established formal navigation schools where elite students, called wayfinders, memorized a mental map of the stars, currents, and the flight paths of seabirds. Their canoe was their lighthouse, and the entire cosmos was its lens. Meanwhile, the trading hubs of the Indian Ocean blended these approaches. Ports from East Africa to the Arabian Peninsula utilized a mix of simple fire beacons for local fishermen and relied on the deep, specialized knowledge of Arab and Indian pilots who carried detailed sailing directions, known as romangs, which described coastlines and star paths with poetic precision. Why did such distinct systems emerge from the same fundamental human need? Political stability was a key accelerator. A centralized, bureaucratic empire like Han China could fund and standardize a network of towers. In contrast, the competitive, city-state culture of the Greeks and Phoenicians drove innovation through commercial rivalry, each port trying to outshine its neighbor to capture more trade. Geographical isolation played an equally powerful role. The Polynesian islands, separated by immense oceanic distances, had to develop a self-reliant celestial method. Their survival depended on a knowledge system that was portable and independent of any fixed land structure. Trade routes became the nervous system of technological exchange. A Persian mirror design might slowly make its way to a Greek port, where local engineers would adapt its principles to amplify their own signal fires. A story of a Chinese smoke signal tower carried by a merchant along the Silk Road could inspire an Indian Roger to build a similar structure. Yet, despite this cross-pollination, deep-seated cultural values acted as a preservative, ensuring that borrowed ideas were remade in a local image. Indigenous knowledge often provided the crucial, ground-level complement to these grander systems. While an imperial tower might guide ships to a general region, it was the local fisherfolk who held the intimate secrets of the tides, the hidden rocks, and the safe coves, knowledge passed down orally for generations. This universal drive to conquer the darkness, to build a bridge of safety across the treacherous water, reveals a profound commonality in human ingenuity. From the Pacific wayfinder reading the swell to the Roman watchkeeper tending his flame, the goal was identical. The solutions, however, were as diverse as the cultures that conceived them, each one a brilliant reflection of a unique world, etched in fire, smoke, and stars. A ship captain staring into a moonless blackness faced more than just a navigational puzzle. He confronted a profound psychological crisis. Every decision to sail beyond the sight of land was an act of courage balanced on a knife's edge of fear. Psychological historian Dr. Samantha Rivers frames this perfectly, stating that ancient navigation required what we would now call high-risk decision-making with incomplete information, a profound psychological challenge. The mariner's mind was his most vital instrument, constantly filtering a torrent of ambiguous sensory data, the shifting stars, the ambiguous swell, the distant cry of a bird, all while battling the gnawing anxiety that a single misjudgment could mean death for his entire crew. This immense pressure forged a unique form of mental resilience. Mariners learned to trust their intuition, a gut feeling honed from years of experience that often whispered the correct course when all visible clues had vanished. They developed a deep, almost spiritual connection to their vessel, feeling its subtle vibrations through the deck as it communicated the language of the sea directly through their feet. To manage the terror of the unknown, sailors across cultures created a rich tapestry of rituals and superstitions. Whistling on a ship was forbidden for fear of summoning a storm. The presence of a woman on board was often considered bad luck, a superstition born from a deep-seated need to control an uncontrollable environment through strict symbolic rules. These were not mere quirks, they were essential coping mechanisms that provided a sense of agency in the face of chaos. Trust was the invisible currency that made the entire system work. A Greek merchant captain had to place absolute faith in the unknown keeper of a Carthaginian signal fire, trusting that the distant glow was maintained with the same diligence as the beacons of his homeland. This trust transcended language and culture, built on the universal understanding that the sea was a shared enemy. The development of more reliable systems, like the great lighthouses, slowly began to shift this maritime psychology. The steady, predictable flame of the Pharaohs did more than just guide ships, it calmed minds. It represented order, predictability, and the reassuring presence of a centralized authority that could tame the coastal darkness. This reduced, though never eliminated, the baseline level of fear, allowing for more ambitious voyages and a greater willingness to sail during the most dangerous hours. The stories they told around the fire after a long voyage served a crucial psychological function beyond mere practical instruction. Epic tales of heroes guided by gods or saved by a sudden beam of light were narratives of hope. They reinforced the belief that even in the most desperate circumstances, a path home could be found, that the universe was not entirely indifferent to their struggle. What does this ancient psychology teach us about our own adaptation to technological uncertainty? We may no longer fear a starless night at sea, but we now face the anxiety of a dead battery in a foreign city or a lost satellite signal in a wilderness. The fundamental human challenge remains the same: how to maintain our bearings when the systems we rely upon fail. The ancient mariner's greatest skill was not his ability to read the stars, but his capacity to stay calm and resourceful when the stars disappeared. That mental fortitude, the quiet courage to navigate the unknown with little more than intuition and hope, is a timeless lesson written not in stone but in the human spirit. Our everyday language is a living museum of these ancient struggles. Words we use without a second thought carry the salt and smoke of a forgotten maritime world. A beacon is no longer just a fire on a hill, it is a guiding principle or a signal of hope. To watch is not merely to stay awake, it is to remain vigilant. A guide is not only a person holding a stone mirror, but anyone who illuminates a path forward. These terms crossed from the technical lexicon of sailors into the universal vocabulary of human aspiration, because the journey they described was so fundamental. Linguistic anthropologist Dr. Aaron Goldberg confirms this deep connection. He states navigation metaphors structure how we think about life challenges. This connection dates to ancient maritime experience. When we speak of weathering a storm in our personal lives or of finding our bearings after a setback, we are not just using pretty phrases. We are invoking the precise, high-stakes experiences of those ancient mariners for whom surviving a squall or correcting a course was a matter of life and death. The lighthouse evolved into one of humanity's most potent symbols. In literature, it represents clarity and safe harbor amidst chaos. In political speeches, it stands for moral leadership. In religious texts, it is a divine signal offering salvation. Why did this particular structure, and not the signal fire or the polished mirror, capture the global imagination? The lighthouse was permanent, steadfast, and institutional. A fire could be extinguished, but a great lighthouse implied a lasting commitment, a promise carved in stone that endured beyond any single keeper's lifetime. The concept of staying the course is another direct inheritance. For a captain navigating by the stars, holding a steady heading against contrary winds and currents was a physical and mental discipline. That phrase now defines perseverance in any long-term endeavor, from a career to a marriage. We speak of being adrift or lost when we lack direction, and of reaching a safe harbor when we find security. These are not accidents of language. They are the echoes of a time when such conditions were measured in nautical miles and the lives of a crew. Some terms faded because the technologies they described became obsolete. We no longer talk about reading the swell or sounding the line in daily conversation because those specific skills are no longer common experiences. The concepts that survived were those with the broadest emotional resonance, the ones that mapped perfectly onto the universal human journey. The idea of a guiding light is powerful because everyone, in some way, has known the fear of darkness and the profound relief of seeing a way forward. This linguistic legacy continues to shape our thinking today. We design user interfaces with navigation menus. We look for beacons of innovation in science. We hope for a watchful eye in our leaders. The frameworks we use to describe progress, safety, and purpose are still, in many ways, the frameworks built by ancient sailors staring into the black, their survival depending on a distant, flickering point of reference. The future of this ancient mystery lies not in dusty archives, but in the subtle signals hidden along forgotten coastlines. While we have pieced together a compelling story from scorched stones and fragmented mirrors, entire chapters remain unwritten. The next great discoveries in pre-lighthouse navigation will likely come from emerging technologies that allow us to see the invisible. Underwater archaeology presents a particularly promising frontier, as rising sea levels have submerged countless ancient coastal settlements. The remains of early signal platforms or the tools of their keepers may be preserved in the silt of these sunken shores, waiting for a submersible's camera to find them. On land, LiDAR scanning is already revolutionizing our view. Research futurist Dr. Chloe Bennett confirms this, stating, "LiDAR scanning of coastal areas is revealing previously unknown signal station networks. We are just beginning this exploration." This laser technology can strip away dense forest cover to reveal the faint, geometric outlines of ancient structures invisible to the naked eye, potentially mapping a vast, interconnected guidance system we never knew existed. In the laboratory, advanced materials analysis could finally unlock the secrets of the polished stone mirrors. Techniques like residue analysis might detect microscopic traces of soot or specific polishing compounds, confirming their use near fires. High-resolution, three-dimensional scanning could map their curvature with incredible precision, allowing us to digitally recreate their optical properties and finally understand just how far their amplified light could truly travel. This leads to another powerful tool, digital modeling. Imagine creating a virtual ancient sea with accurate star positions, wave dynamics, and weather conditions. We could then simulate a voyage, testing historical claims about night sailing tactics with scientific rigor. How accurately could a crew navigate using only swell patterns on an overcast night? A digital simulation could provide probabilities and margins of error, turning legend into quantifiable data. The path forward is inherently interdisciplinary. A breakthrough might occur when a marine geologist's core sample of coastal sediment, showing a 1,000-year layer of charcoal, is cross-referenced with an astronomer's model of ancient star paths and a historian's translation of a forgotten sailing manual. This collaborative approach is our most powerful new methodology, yet we must also be honest about the limits of our knowledge. Some historical questions may remain permanently unanswered. The exact chemical recipes for colored signal flames are likely lost forever, as are the subtle, intuitive skills of the greatest navigators, the feeling of a specific current or the exact sound of a distant echo. These were forms of embodied knowledge that died with their masters. This is where citizen science projects could play a vital role, enlisting the help of sailors, hikers, and local historians to survey coastlines for potential signal sites or to test simple mirror reflections on the water. The future of understanding our past is a collaborative, technologically enhanced journey, one that promises to illuminate the dark corners of history with a light as focused and revealing as the ancient mirrors themselves.